I was standing there in the pouring rain, holding the remnants of what was supposed to be a perfect day. The bouquet of roses, now battered and dripping, had been meant for someone else, but fate, it seemed, had other plans. It was my best friend Jake's birthday, and I had planned a surprise party down to the last detail. But as I stood there, shivering, watching the rain mix with the tears streaming down my face, I knew something had gone terribly wrong. The day he kissed me was supposed to be a moment of celebration, not a catalyst for chaos. Earlier that day, everything seemed normal. Jake and I had been inseparable since childhood, our bond unbreakable. We shared everything, dreams, fears, even our deepest secrets. But there was one secret I kept buried deep within, a truth I was too afraid to admit even to myself. I was in love with Jake. It was a love that went beyond friendship, a love that made my heart race every time he smiled, every time he laughed. But I never dared to say it out loud, fearing it would shatter our perfect friendship. The party was supposed to be a grand gesture, a way to show Jake how much he meant to me without revealing my true feelings. I had invited all our friends, decorated the house with his favorite colors, and even baked his favorite cake. But as the guests arrived and the music played, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Jake seemed distant, his smiles forced, his laughter hollow. I chalked it up to birthday jitters, but deep down, I knew there was more to it. As the night wore on, the tension grew thicker. Jake pulled me aside, his eyes filled with a mix of emotions I couldn't decipher. "Alex," he began, his voice trembling, "there's something I need to tell you." My heart pounded in my chest, 1,000 scenarios racing through my mind. Was he going to confess his love for me, or was he about to reveal a secret that would change everything? Before he could say another word, the power went out, plunging us into darkness. The room erupted in laughter and cheers, but Jake and I stood frozen, the moment hanging heavy between us. And then, in the dim glow of the emergency lights, Jake leaned in and kissed me. It was a soft, gentle kiss, filled with all the unspoken words and hidden feelings we had kept locked away. In that moment, I knew I was in love with Jake, and I knew he felt the same way. But as quickly as the moment came, it vanished. Jake pulled away, his eyes wide with shock and fear. "I'm sorry," he whispered, before turning and running out into the rain. I stood there, stunned, the world crumbling around me. The day he kissed me was the moment I knew I was in love, but it was also the moment everything changed. I stood there, rooted to the spot, the taste of his lips still lingering on mine, as the rain pounded against the windows, echoing the chaos inside me. The room, once filled with laughter and warmth, now felt cold and empty. Our friends, oblivious to the storm brewing within me, continued to celebrate, their voices a distant hum. I couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but replay that kiss in my mind, over and over again. It was everything I had ever wanted, but it was also the one thing that terrified me the most. Jake was always the brave one, the one who took risks and chased after what he wanted. I, on the other hand, was the cautious one, the one who played it safe, who never stepped out of line. But this was uncharted territory for both of us. I knew Jake had been struggling with his feelings, trying to make sense of them just as I was. We had talked about it once, late at night, under the cover of darkness. He had hinted at feeling more than friendship, but I had been too afraid to acknowledge it, too afraid to admit that I felt the same way. As I finally willed my feet to move, I found myself walking towards the door, towards the rain, towards Jake. I had to find him, had to talk to him, had to understand what this meant for us. But as I stepped out into the storm, I saw something that made my heart sink. Jake was sitting in his car, the engine running, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a pain that cut me to the core. And then, without a word, he drove away, leaving me alone in the rain. I didn't understand. I didn't understand why he was running, why he was afraid. I didn't understand why, after finally admitting our feelings, we were further apart than ever. I wanted to chase after him, to make him see that we could face this together, that we could be brave together. But I was rooted to the spot, the rain soaking through my clothes, the cold seeping into my bones. I stood there, watching his taillights disappear into the night, taking a piece of my heart with him. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Jake avoided me, his calls went unanswered, his messages unread. I was lost, adrift in a sea of uncertainty. The day he kissed me was supposed to be the start of something beautiful, but it felt more like the end of something I could never get back. Our friends noticed the change, the distance between us, but they didn't know the truth. They didn't know that a single kiss had changed everything, had shattered our perfect friendship and left us both struggling to pick up the pieces. I was determined to find a way back to him, to us, but I didn't know if Jake felt the same way. I didn't know if he was still the boy I fell in love with, or if he was someone new, someone shaped by fear and regret. All I knew was that I couldn't give up, not yet, not ever. The days blurred into a monotonous haze. I went through the motions of life, but everything felt dull, muted, like I was watching someone else's story unfold from a distance. The vibrant colors of the world seemed to have faded to gray, and the laughter that once filled my life was now a distant echo. Jake's absence left a void that nothing could fill. Our mutual friends tried to bridge the gap, inviting me to hangouts and gatherings, but it was never the same without him. I found myself making excuses, retreating into a shell of solitude, where the only company I kept was the memory of that kiss and the unanswered questions that haunted me. One evening, as I sat alone in my room, staring at the unopened messages on my phone, there was a soft knock at the door. I hesitated, not wanting to face whoever was on the other side, but the knock came again, more insistent this time. With a sigh, I opened the door to find Lily, Jake's sister, standing there. Her eyes were filled with a mix of concern and determination. "Alex," she said softly, "we need to talk." Lily had always been like a sister to me too. She knew Jake and me better than anyone, and she had seen the change in both of us. I let her in, and we sat down, the silence between us heavy with unspoken words. "Jake told me what happened," she finally said, her voice gentle but firm. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't expected Jake to confide in anyone, let alone his sister. "He's scared, Alex. Scared of what this means, scared of losing you, scared of everything changing." I looked at her, my eyes wide with surprise. "But why? Why is he so afraid?" I thought he felt the same way I did. Lily sighed, her eyes filled with a sadness that mirrored my own. "He does, Alex, he does feel the same way, but he's struggling with it. He's struggling with the idea of coming out, of facing the world as someone different from who he thought he was. He's afraid of what people will think, of how they'll react." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had been so focused on my own feelings, on my own fear of losing Jake, that I hadn't stopped to consider what he was going through. I had always known Jake was brave, but this was a different kind of bravery. This was facing the world with a truth that could change everything. Lily reached out and took my hand, her grip warm and reassuring. "He needs you, Alex. He needs to know that you're there for him, that you'll stand by him no matter what. He needs to know that you love him, not just as a friend, but as something more." Her words sparked a fire within me, a determination to fight for what we had, for what we could be. I knew I had to find Jake, had to talk to him, had to make him see that we could face this together. But I also knew that it wouldn't be easy. Jake was running from more than just his feelings. He was running from himself, and I had to help him find his way back. With a newfound resolve, I set out to find Jake. I started with the places we used to go together, the park where we'd spend hours talking, the coffee shop where we'd study, the rooftop where we'd watch the stars. Each place held a piece of our shared history, a fragment of the friendship that had grown into something more. But Jake was nowhere to be found. It was as if he had vanished, leaving behind only echoes of our past. Days turned into a week, and my search felt increasingly futile. I began to doubt myself, to wonder if I was chasing a ghost. But then, one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, I found myself standing at the edge of the lake where we used to go fishing. It was our secret spot, a place where we could escape the world and just be ourselves. And there, sitting on the old wooden pier, was Jake. He looked different, thinner, paler, his eyes haunted by shadows, but he was still Jake, still the boy I had fallen in love with. I approached him slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. He looked up as I neared, his eyes meeting mine with a mix of surprise and relief. "Alex," he whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion, "what are you doing here?" I sat down beside him, the wood creaking softly under our weight. "I came to find you, Jake. I came to tell you that I'm here for you, no matter what. I came to tell you that I love you." He looked at me, his eyes wide with shock. "Alex, I can't ask you to do that. I can't ask you to face this with me. It's too much, too hard." I reached out and took his hand, holding it tightly in mine. "You're not asking, Jake. I'm choosing. I'm choosing to be here for you, to stand by you, to love you, because that's what you do when you love someone. You choose them every day, no matter what." Jake looked at me, his eyes filled with tears. "But what if I'm not strong enough? What if I can't do this?" I squeezed his hand, my voice steady and sure. "Then we'll be strong together. We'll face this together, one step at a time. You don't have to do this alone, Jake. You never have to be alone again." As we sat there, the sun setting behind us, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I knew the road ahead would be hard, that there would be challenges and obstacles to overcome. But I also knew that as long as we were together, we could face anything. The day he kissed me was the moment I knew I was in love. And now, sitting here with him, I knew that love was strong enough to conquer any fear, any doubt, any challenge. But just as I was about to tell him this, Jake's phone rang. He looked down at the screen, his face paling. "It's my dad," he said, his voice trembling. I knew Jake's dad was strict, traditional, and not someone who would easily accept Jake's truth. Jake looked at me, his eyes filled with fear. "What do I do?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "You answer it, Jake. You answer it and you tell him the truth. Because you deserve to live your life openly and honestly, and I'll be right here with you every step of the way." Jake's hand trembled as he reached for the phone, his eyes locked onto mine as if drawing strength from my gaze. I nodded encouragingly, my heart pounding in my chest. He took a deep breath and answered the call, putting it on speaker so I could hear. "Hey, Dad," Jake said, his voice surprisingly steady despite the fear in his eyes. "Jake," his dad's voice boomed through the speaker, stern and authoritative. "Where have you been? Your mother and I have been worried sick." Jake glanced at me, and I gave him a reassuring smile. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something important," Jake began, his voice wavering slightly. "It's something I've been struggling with for a while now." There was a pause on the other end, and I could almost feel the tension radiating through the phone. "What is it, Jake?" his dad asked, his voice softer but still guarded. Jake took a deep breath, his grip on my hand tightening. "Dad, I'm gay, and I'm in love with Alex." The silence that followed was deafening. I held my breath, waiting for the explosion, the anger, the rejection. But what came next was something neither of us expected. "Jake," his dad said, his voice choked with emotion. "I've known for a while now, your mother and we've seen the way you look at Alex, the way you light up when you're with him. We've been waiting for you to be ready to tell us." Tears welled up in Jake's eyes, and I felt my own eyes grow misty. You knew," Jake stammered, disbelief etched on his face. "Yes, son," his dad replied, his voice gentle. "And we love you no matter what. We just want you to be happy." Jake looked at me, his eyes filled with a mix of relief, joy, and disbelief. I smiled back at him, my heart swelling with love and pride. In that moment, I knew that everything would be okay. We had faced our fears, stood up for our love, and found acceptance in the most unexpected place. As Jake hung up the phone, he turned to me, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "I can't believe it," he whispered. "I can't believe they knew and they still love me." I reached out and cupped his face, my thumbs brushing away the tears that had begun to fall. "They love you because you're you, Jake, and so do I, more than anything." And then, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with the most beautiful colors I had ever seen, Jake leaned in and kissed me. It was a kiss filled with promise, with hope, with a future that was finally within our reach. The day he kissed me was the moment I knew I was in love. And now that love had grown into something stronger, something unbreakable, something that would last a lifetime. As we pulled away, our foreheads resting against each other, I knew that our journey was just beginning. There would be challenges ahead, but we would face them together, hand in hand, hearts intertwined. And that was all that mattered. So, if you've made it this far, thank you for joining us on this emotional roller coaster.